This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Going into Ahsoka, many were hopeful, most for a great Star Wars series, some for a world between the worlds pathway towards undoing the sequel trilogy. 8 episodes later, unless you were a fan of showrunner Dave Filoni's earlier animated work to begin with, then chances are you were left deflated and disappointed. Because in the end, Ahsoka turned out to be yet another embarrassing commercial and creative Star Wars failure. In this postmortem, I will begin with going through the viewing figures we have at our disposal and how bad they are, before turning towards the major overriding creative problems, including utterly wasting Thrawn, the Ray Stevenson problem, and the increasingly uncertain future. Speaking of the future, let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. For years, there have been rumors that Ahsoka was going to be the place where Favreau and Filoni snuck in their secret weapon aimed at removing the sequel trilogy from canon, the world between worlds being the rumored candidate for achieving that. Well, now that the series is behind us, unless it was done in some other way and so subtly done at that no one picked up on it, it didn't happen. Pablo Hidalgo even referenced the rumors and mocked them in social media, so it would appear that Ahsoka is still racing towards the reviled sequel trilogy face first. That's gonna cause a lot of jaded fans to lose hope and do what millions of others already have done and cancel their Disney Plus subscription. But if that's you, then we urge you, please don't take to the high seas for your latest Star Wars or Marvel fix, as neither Midnight's Edge nor our sponsors condone piracy. Not only is it wrong, you would be exposing yourself to endless spyware, tracking software and other malware out there on the high seas, and that's on top of all the data that could be stolen from you during all of your regular browsing, and sold to third parties. Have you noticed all the spam and scam emails you're getting? Well, they got your emails from those third parties, that's how that happened. There is a fix for all of that though. To protect yourself, you need to protect your data, and a good way of doing that is through a VPN, such as the one delivered by this channel sponsored Surfshark. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, is a privacy protection tool which guarantees instant online safety and encrypts all data sent via the internet, thereby protecting your data and you. But there's more. Surfshark allows you to bypass geo-blocking restrictions by changing the country you access the internet from, which gives some great advantages when it comes to streaming. For instance, you can access 15 different Netflix libraries, all with a different selection of movies and TV series, simply by changing your virtual location. Which is easy, because Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in more than 100 countries around the world. Outside of the US, Star, the international version of Hulu, comes bundled with Disney+. If you're in the US and change your location to, say, the UK, well then you just might get that too. That's pretty good, but it gets even better. If you type in the code MIDNIGHT when ordering, that triggers an exclusive offer of 3 months for free. Furthermore, Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Do check out the link in the description below for further details and to order. Thanks to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's return to Ahsoka and just how badly it fared. As we covered in an earlier video, Samba TV revealed that in its first 6 days, 1.2 million Samba-connected US households watched the premiere episode of Ahsoka on Disney+. This suggested that even outside of Samba households, Ahsoka was underperforming in a big way, right down there with Andor, which, for its success with critics, remained an abysmal commercial failure that ended up chasing the viewers. However, Disney quickly countered, officially announcing that the premiere episode of Ahsoka drew 14 million views in its first week. No further details were provided, but since this was the official number from Disney, this is what made the headlines. Far be it for me to say that Disney lied. I am sure there is some rationale behind that number, much like there was back when Amazon announced that the first episode of The Rings of Power drew 25 million viewers. A figure it soon transpired they had arrived at by assuming there were 4 to 5 people watching in every household where one actual view was registered. Regardless, when the Nielsen ratings were revealed, they demonstrated that Samba had been right all along. Ahsoka performed much like the commercial failure Andor. The number released by Disney had been massaged in some way. Let's be generous and put it like that. At the time of making this video, we only have the Nielsen data for the first 2 episodes, but 2 episodes in, the objective and verifiable viewing figures suggest that Ahsoka wasn't saving Star Wars. On the contrary, the series was largely ignored by a fractured fanbase. It isn't just the Star Wars fanbase that is fractured. Star Wars itself is also fractured. There is of course the original trilogy and there is George Lucas' prequel trilogy, yet both of these stand on their own, and both serve as entry points, with no prior viewing required to get on board. Then there is Disney's massively hated and reviled sequel trilogy. The only required watching is the original trilogy, but since the sequel trilogy ends with the utter destruction of the entire Skywalker bloodline and therefore the entirety of the Star Wars franchise, there is no real future beyond it, which is no doubt why every later Star Wars installment has chronologically taken place prior to it. This brings us to Jon Favreau's The Mandalorian, and the extended Mandoverse, let's just call it that. For a long time the flagship of Disney+, its success was no doubt in part down to that the only required watching for it was the original trilogy. Other than that, you could go in cold, though of course the later series in the Mandoverse assumed you had seen the previous ones, right up until Ahsoka. But before we get to Ahsoka, there is one iteration of Star Wars left to cover, namely Dave Filoni's animated universe. Spun off from the prequel trilogy, it consists of multiple series spanning hundreds of episodes, with a mythology lifted from not just both the trilogies, but the comics and even the books as well, including Timothy Zahn's Thrawn books. This makes Filoni's animated universe uniquely convoluted and with few points of entry. It doesn't matter how well you know the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy. If you watch a random episode of any of these animated series, you'll be as lost as if you were trying to read a random X-Men comic from the 90s. Even if it's written for children and has hideous childish designs and animation, Filoni's animated Star Wars is so interconnected and requires such a detailed knowledge of past events that unless you've been watching from the very beginning, you'll be utterly lost. The big, overriding problem for Ahsoka, the one from which every other problem is derived, is that in order to be caught up, it is not enough to have seen the prior Mandoverse series. Oh no, you need to have seen the entirety of Filoni's animated universe. We don't know what has happened behind the scenes, or what the future yet holds. But by all outwardly accounts, Dave Filoni has, with Kathleen Kennedy aiding and abetting, hijacked the entire Mandoverse, while Favreau is nowhere to be seen.
I think people are really excited for Dave Filoni.
And we sat down and talked with Dave about it. You know what we're seeing, and Dave talked a lot about this. Obviously, John and Dave. You know, I wouldn't do it without Dave.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave created so much of what was in Clone Wars and Rebels, and well, that's really building toward what Dave's doing in the feature space. Certainly looking at what Dave's been doing with Ahsoka, he's, you know, what's great about Jim is he's a writer-director, much like Dave is. So that Dave is very influenced by Kurosawa and Japanese films. Dave's.
And make no mistake about it, it was Jon Favreau that was the secret sauce behind The Mandalorian's success, not Filoni. It was Favreau that knew how to get the audience engaged and at all times up to speed with what was happening. By contrast, if Filoni has shown anything, it is his inability to do just that. If you want to keep up with his animated universe, you need to have seen all of it. It is therefore unfortunate that on Ahsoka, Dave Filoni is the sole showrunner and only credited writer. Instead of making Ahsoka accessible to everyone, like The Mandalorian was, he made the creative decision to continue the storylines he had begun in his animated universe, thus making the entire animated universe required watching, or put another way, your homework. All of the problems with Ahsoka, every last one, are derived from that fateful decision. This would never have been allowed to happen anywhere else. To bring forth a counterexample, I recently reviewed the Conan the Barbarian comic book reboot by Titan Comics, and one of the things that impressed me the most with it, outside of the art and storytelling, both of which could have been ripped straight out of the Savage Sword of Conan from the 70s, is how accessible it is. What I mean by that is, if you know nothing about Conan other than that he's a big man with a sword, this book will introduce you to everything you need to know, all while telling a thrilling yarn in the process. But if you know a little bit more, if you saw the Schwarzenegger movie, there are references to it that you'll recognize for some additional immersion and enjoyment. And if you're a hardcore fan of either the Marvel Conan comics, the Dark Horse comics, or even the original stories by Robert E. Howard, you'll see the deep references that go way over everyone else's heads, as well as the steps that have been taken to ensure that these will be fresh stories, not covering ground or stories that have been adequately told before. That is how you generally want to do it. Bring in as many fans as possible and do it in a way where no one is left out, but where the hardcore fans get a deeper understanding of the stories than the more casual fans. Alas, that's not what happened on Ahsoka. If you didn't follow the animated series, you're left out, period. With any other property, or at any other studio, hell, even at any other division within Disney, this would never have been allowed to fly. Everywhere else, there would have been some kind of gatekeeper to prevent $200 million being spent on a series that is built on a children's animated cartoon with a Batwoman-sized audience. But at Lucasfilm, what Kennedy says goes, and Kennedy approved of this. Recognizing what a boneheaded decision this was, even The Hollywood Reporter did a feature story where they listed 15 episodes you needed to have seen prior to Ahsoka, all while acknowledging that even this was a bare minimum and not really enough. Ideally, you should have seen all of it in order to be fully caught up to speed for Ahsoka. Here it should be mentioned that the combined running time of those 15 bare minimum episodes is still longer than the total running time of all 8 episodes of the Ahsoka series, so getting fully caught up represents quite an investment in time. For someone like me, who has never seen Filoni's animated series and never will, this means that much of Ahsoka is incomprehensible. Before the premiere, Dave Filoni stated that no, you don't need to have watched any of the animated series in order to understand Ahsoka, but that was clearly not accurate. While you eventually get the information you need to understand what is going on over the course of the series, you don't get the information when you need it. Instead, you'll get what you need to piece it together after the fact, after the dramatic on-screen moment has passed. Not that there are many such moments, because despite this being live action and aimed at a much bigger audience, the writing is still at the level of a series made for children. Then it doesn't matter how much it looks like Star Wars, and it does, no complaints there. But between how convoluted it is and how shallow every single interaction is, there isn't much to get excited over here. So, what is Ahsoka's story? As has become tradition in recent Disney projects, the title Ahsoka is something of a misnomer, because while the series is named after her, she's really just a supporting character. The real star of the series is Sabine Wren, a Mandalorian who, after having walked off being run through by a lightsaber, decides to add becoming a Jedi to her all-consuming mission of finding some dude called Ezra. Those of us who haven't seen the animated series are not informed of who he is or why he is so special, at least not until much later. Meanwhile, Sabine's once and future master Ahsoka Tano is worried that Thrawn might return, so she's desperate to find him. Again, those of us who haven't seen the animated series are not informed of who Thrawn is or why he's so feared, at least not until much, much later. Some stuff happens, and eventually Sabine finds this Ezra, whom those of us who never watched the animated series later find out sacrificed himself to banish Thrawn, while Ahsoka finds Thrawn, in the process enabling him to return and undoing Ezra's sacrifice. In the end though, Thrawn returns, and Ezra is able to change places with Ahsoka and Sabine, and since this is written like a cartoon for kids, he is dressed like a stormtrooper in front of his rebel friends, teasing them, creating some faux drama. If someone had shot him, he'd have deserved it. Along the way, there are some member berries, and there are some witches who will probably become important later on, and if you can tell, I don't care, because these were all cartoon characters, even if they were in live action. And in one case, that was a real tragedy. Unlike the others mentioned, Thrawn did not originate in the animated series, but in the books by Timothy Zahn, whom we have interviewed. Check it out. If they had straight up adapted those books and done Thrawn right, he could have been a Thanos-level villain, which he by rights should have been. Alas, this is not the Thrawn of the original Timothy Zahn books. You see, a child-friendly adaptation of Thrawn already appeared in the animated series, where he was soundly defeated. And the Thrawn in the Ahsoka series is literally the Thrawn from the animated series brought to live action, by the same actor who did the voice acting in the animated series, no less. Now, to be clear, that is not a dig at Lars Mikkelsen. He is a fine actor, with many great performances under his belt. But he was obviously only cast in this role because he already did the voice in the cartoon. If they were looking to do an accurate adaptation of Timothy Zahn's Thrawn from the books, then chances are actors like Benedict Cumberbatch would have been higher on the wish list. But here, they made the decision to be beholden to what already had been done in animation. Imagine for a moment if that had been done to Thanos. Everyone knows Thanos, because he is one of the greatest cinematic villains of all times. And he is that because the filmmakers adapted him fresh from the original source material in a manner which they felt would work best in live action. But Thanos actually appeared in the 1998 Silver Surfer cartoon. Just imagine if the powers that be at Marvel had allowed themselves to be bound by that cartoon and adapt Thanos with the voice and personality from it.
Young, so very delicate. Soon I'll crush the entire universe between my hands in the greatest offering Chaos could have. The time reversal field, it is out of power. Oh, my lady, I am sorry. I have failed.
That's what they did with Thrawn. They held the character back by allowing themselves to be bound by an adaptation made for a children's cartoon. On top of that, in Ahsoka, he is no smarter than Dave Filoni is able to write him, to the detriment of the series. All of that being said, there was one not just good, but great character in the series. The one standout character in the show was one of the few written for it, namely Baylan Skoll. Of all the characters, he was the one who at no point made an ass out of himself. He was the one with a compelling mission that kept you interested, and he even defeated Ahsoka in combat, which is pretty amazing considering that no man can beat any woman at anything in modern day Disney. But if we're completely honest, more than the writing, what made Baylan Skoll stand out the way he did was the performance by actor Ray Stevenson. Ever since Rome, Ray Stevenson has been one of my absolute favorite actors. Enigmatic, charismatic, and immensely skilled at his craft, he has only recently been getting the attention and praise he always deserved. Star Wars getting him was indeed a get, and even the most ardent critic of this series will admit that Ray Stevenson was great in it, and they want to see more of Baylan Skoll. But therein lies a problem. On May 22nd of this year, while filming in Italy, Ray Stevenson #died suddenly from cause unknown. Obviously, this is a personal tragedy, first and foremost affecting his wife and children. Secondarily to that, his passing represents a major loss to the cultural landscape, for Ray Stevenson was a great actor who was in the prime of his career when he passed, with many, many great performances left in him. I've even heard rumors suggesting he was set to reprise his role as the Punisher in the upcoming Avengers Secret War. And I do maintain he was the best Punisher, and certainly the one by far most true to the original Punisher comic books. For Star Wars though, Ray Stevenson's death is a bigger problem than it is for Marvel. Ray Stevenson would appear to have been intended to have a major role in future seasons of Ahsoka, maybe even all the way up to Dave Filoni's feature film, which is meant to conclude the entire Mandoverse. Now, with Stevenson sadly no longer with us, they either have to recast, which won't be easy and won't go over well, or they have to diminish his role to where a CGI replacement can conclude his storyline in a rushed fashion. Either way, it's a severe blow to Filoni's plans for the future. Another blow is the tepid viewership numbers and response from fans and critics alike. Due to the mismanagement the Star Wars brand has suffered under Disney and Kathleen Kennedy's stewardship, enthusiasm and passion for the brand is on the decline, and rather than reversing it, it looks as though Ahsoka just might contribute towards making that decline even steeper. So, where do you think they should go from here? And what did you think about the series? Let me know in the comments, and before you go, remember that to help protect your data and bypass quarrelsome geo-blocking restrictions, you should get Surfshark VPN. Use our code MIDNIGHT to get 3 months for free. Link is in the description.